Welcome to another deep dive. We've got a really interesting article to dig into today.
Oh, yeah.
It's called From Deficit to Dignity, Questioning the Foundations of Autism Guidance.
Okay. Yeah, I read that one.
Pretty pointed critique of Autism Parenting Magazine, some of their approaches.
Yeah, and it's not just a surface-level critique either.
No, it's not.
This one really digs deep into how we think about autism,
How we understand it, yeah.
how we support autistic people.
It really gets you thinking.
For sure.
I mean, just the term dysregulation, which the author really takes on.
Right?
Like, what are your thoughts on that? You see that term everywhere?
Well, honestly, it's a term loaded with problems.
Really?
I think so, yeah. When we call it dysregulation, we're basically saying that autistic emotional responses,
Okay.
like they're inherently flawed.
So, like, there's something wrong with them.
Right. Like there's
Okay.
something wrong with how autistic people experience
Yeah.
and express their emotions.
Instead of seeing it as a natural response to their environment,
Yeah.
we're making it a pathology.
Yeah.
We're making it a symptom
A symptom?
of some disorder.
Yeah, and that's where the idea of the social model of disability comes in.
Okay, right. The article talks about that.
The social model says that instead of viewing disability
Uh-huh.
as something inherent in the individual,
Yeah.
it sees disability as a result of how society is structured.
So the problem isn't the person.
Not necessarily.
It's the barriers that society puts up.
Think about it.
Yeah.
How much of what we label as problematic behavior
In autistic people.
is actually just a totally reasonable response
To a world.
to an environment that's not meeting their needs?
Oh, that's such a good point.
Yes.
We're trying to fit a square peg into a round hole.
That's what it feels like sometimes.
It does.
And that's exactly what the article's saying. The author uses their own experience as an example, actually.
They do?
They talk about how, as they got older,
Uh-huh.
their own so-called dysregulation,
Okay.
like, significantly decreased as they had more control over their environment.
So as an adult, they were able
Yeah.
to shape their world a little bit more.
Exactly. They had more autonomy,
Okay.
more agency.
So it wasn't like they fixed their autism.
Not at all.
They just created a better environment.
They found an environment that worked for them.
That's amazing.
It really is a powerful insight.
Yeah.
It makes us reconsider what we even mean by dysregulation.
Yeah?
And how can we create environments that support,
Autistic people.
instead of trying to make them conform
To neurotypical norms.
neurotypical norms, right?
Like, we've been so focused on changing the person
Yes.
that we've totally forgotten about the world around them.
I know, and it's a big takeaway for anyone,
Anyone, yeah.
whether you're a parent or a teacher.
Therapists.
Therapist, right. Anyone who cares about autistic people,
We have to do better.
we have a responsibility to create environments that support.
Neurodiversity. So we've talked about dysregulation, but the article also goes after Autism Parenting Magazine for something else.
Oh, yeah.
What's that? The lack of autistic voices.
You know, it's a huge issue.
It is.
And the article does a great job of highlighting it.
Yeah.
Try to imagine learning about any culture
Yeah.
without hearing from the people who are actually in that group.
It wouldn't make sense.
It just doesn't.
Like trying to learn about America from a textbook written by someone who's never been here.
Exactly. You get such a skewed,
Incomplete picture.
totally incomplete.
And that's what's happening with this magazine.
I think so.
They're presenting this narrow view of autism,
Yeah.
mostly from the perspective of non-autistic parents.
Yeah. And professionals.
And they're missing out on
so much.
so much. All the knowledge and insight
And lived experience.
that autistic people have.
Yeah. It's like they're saying they aren't experts on their own lives.
Wow.
Their perspectives aren't valued.
Creates a real power imbalance.
Absolutely.
The non-artistic profession.
The parents,
Therapists.
they're seen as the experts, the ones with the answers.
And autistic people are just supposed to listen.
It's like the magazine saying, we know what's best for you.
Without even asking.
Without asking, what do you need?
It's dehumanizing.
Totally.
Takes away their agency.
Denies them their right to self-determination.
And it says that autism is something to be fixed.
Instead of just a different way of being.
A different way of being that should be respected.
Valued.
Yes, exactly.
The article makes a really good point
Yeah.
about listening to autistic people themselves.
Right.
They're the real experts.
Absolutely.
And we need to create more space for those voices.
I agree.
Instead of assuming we know what's best.
We need to be asking.
What do you need?
Yeah.
How can we best support you?
How can we create a world
It's truly inclusive.
of neurodiversity?
Yeah.
That's a conversation we need to be having
Not just in the autism community.
in society as a whole.
We need to move away from these deficit-based models.
Toward a more inclusive world?
For everyone.
Okay, so we've seen how that term dysregulation can be problematic.
Right.
And how the magazine doesn't really include autistic voices.
Right.
But there's another critique.
Oh, is there?
The article takes Autism Parenting Magazine to task for relying on outdated research.
Okay, yeah, I noticed that too.
You did.
Yeah, that was a pretty big critique.
And it stood out to me too.
The article actually looked at the sources cited by the magazine. A lot of them are really old.
Oh, wow.
Based on these models of autism that have been challenged.
By who?
By autistic people themselves.
Okay.
And even debunked by more recent research.
So instead of reflecting the current understanding,
right,
the magazine is relying on outdated information.
Potentially even harmful.
So frustrating for parents.
Imagine trying to help your child.
Yeah.
With information that's been discredited.
By the very people it's supposed to be about.
Exactly. It's like we're stuck in a time warp.
A time warp.
Where the same myths and stereotypes keep getting recycled.
Even though we know better?
We know better.
Makes you wonder why they're clinging to these old sources.
It really does.
It does.
Highlights the importance of being critical.
Of information.
Yeah, we can't just take things at face value.
Even if it's from a source that seems
authoritative.
Yeah.
Especially with something as complex as autism.
We need to dig deeper.
Absolutely.
There are multiple perspectives.
The voices of autistic people.
The true experts.
They're the ones who know best.
Because ultimately, they are the ones.
Living with autism every day. Like we're stuck in this echo chamber.
An echo chamber, yeah.
The same outdated ideas about autism just bouncing around.
Bouncing around.
Even though we have access to
Got better information.
So much more nuanced, insightful information now.
Like people are resistant to change.
It feels that way sometimes.
Like they're clinging to these old models.
Because they're comfortable.
Even if they aren't accurate or helpful.
And that's where the article calls for
a paradigm shift.
Yeah, a paradigm shift.
It's like not just about tweaking
the existing system.
Yeah, adding a few autistic voices here and there.
We need like a fundamental rethinking.
A rethinking of how we
understand and approach autism.
Moving away from this idea
of fixing or curing.
Curing autism.
Yeah.
Toward a model that embraces neurodiversity.
Embraces and celebrates neurodiversity.
I love that.
It's about recognizing autistic people.
Yeah.
They're not broken. They're just different. And those differences
could be strengths.
Strengths, creativity, innovation.
Yeah.
If we create environments
that let them flourish.
That allow them to flourish.
Yeah, I love that idea.
It's great.
Shifting the focus.
From limitations to possibilities.
Yeah. Instead of, what's wrong with you?
We should be asking.
What are your strengths?
What are your passions?
How can we help you reach your goals?
Such a better way to approach it.
It is. It really is.
And that requires a willingness to listen.
To listen.
To really hear what autistic people are saying.
To understand.
Value their contributions.
To value their contributions, right?
Creating a world.
Where autistic people
feel seen.
Respected.
Heard.
For who they are.
Not for who we think they should be.
Exactly.
This deep dive has really made me think about the power of language.
It's so powerful.
And how it shapes our perception.
And how the words we use
have real-world consequences.
Real-world consequences.
That critique of dysregulation was a real eye-opener.
It was for me, too.
I never thought about how it frames
autistic emotional responses
as something to be controlled.
Surprise.
And like, your feelings are wrong.
Yeah, you need to fix them.
Instead of, tell me about your experience.
How can I help you feel safe?
Supported.
It's such a subtle shift.
But a powerful one.
It is.
In terms of creating a more understanding environment.
More empathetic and understanding. Yeah. More empathetic.
The article encourages us to be more mindful.
Of the language we use.
Yeah.
To avoid those deficit-based terms.
That pathologize normal human emotions.
Embrace a more neurodiversity-affirming vocabulary.
A vocabulary that celebrates difference.
And recognizes the validity of all human experiences.
Exactly.
I was also curious about your thoughts.
About?
On the article's emphasis on social justice.
Oh, yeah, that's interesting.
I found that really compelling.
I did too.
Yeah.
It takes it beyond just individual accommodations or support strategies. It says that the challenges autistic people face
are rooted in bigger issues.
Systemic issues.
The way society is structured.
The power dynamics that marginalize certain groups.
Recognizing that ableism.
Discrimination against disabled people.
Is a real force.
A pervasive force in our world.
Operates in overt and subtle ways.
From physical barriers.
Inaccessible environments.
To attitudes and assumptions that limit opportunities.
And reinforce stereotypes. The article challenges
To
us.
see those connections?
Yeah, between individual experiences of autism
And these broader social forces.
to work towards a more just and equitable world.
For everyone.
It's about recognizing
Well, autistic people
have the same rights
deserve the same opportunities.
as everyone else.
Access to education, healthcare, employment, social participation.
It's about dismantling the systems
Of oppression.
that create barriers
For autistic people.
and building a world
That's inclusive.
of neurodiversity.
Yeah, it's a big task.
It is, but I think this article gives us some good starting points
For
for having those conversations
Absolutely.
and for taking action.
As we wrap up this deep dive, I'm thinking about how we can create a more inclusive world for autistic people.
Why, for sure.
What are some things we can do to make a difference?
Well, I think one of the most important things is to amplify autistic voices.
Like how?
Seek them out. There are so many autistic writers, speakers, activists.
Sharing their stories, their insights, their perspectives.
What can we do?
Follow them on social media, read their work,
Listen to their podcasts.
watch their videos.
Support their projects.
It's about diversifying the voices we listen to.
Getting a more balanced perspective.
Right. And beyond just consuming information.
We need to create opportunities for them to share their voices.
Yeah, invite them to speak at events.
Be part of panels.
Be consultants on projects.
Make sure they're represented at all levels.
From local communities to national governments.
Yeah, we can advocate for policies that support autistic people,
For sure.
that create inclusive environments.
Promote neurodiversity.
We can donate to organizations doing great work,
Volunteer our time.
right to our elected officials.
Those are all great big picture things.
What about small, everyday things?
Oh, yeah, there are tons.
Like what?
Challenge ableist language
When you see it.
when you hear it.
Educate ourselves and others about autism.
But from autistic perspective,
Yeah.
the most important thing,
What is it?
treat autistic people with respect,
Kindness.
compassion.
It's about recognizing
They're not problems to be solved
as human beings,
with their own strengths and challenges.
they deserve to be treated.
With dignity, empathy, and understanding.
One of the most powerful things about this article
What is it?
is that it emphasizes that creating a more inclusive world,
It's not a solo mission.
it's a collective effort.
It takes all of us
Showing up,
speaking up
working together.
to create a world where everyone can thrive.
It's a vision worth striving for.
Absolutely.
It's been great exploring this article with you.
It has. It really has.
I hope this deep dive has given our listeners some new insights
And maybe spark some inspiration.
to continue learning
Push it.
and taking action
To create a more just and compassionate world.
for autistic people.
And for everyone.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
We encourage you to check out the resources
In the show notes.
and to keep exploring these topics.
On your own.
Until next time, keep diving deep.